If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This episode is brought to you by Dogfish Head Craft Brewery. The Grateful Dead and Dogfish Head have gotten the band back together with the release of Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale, a light-bodied pale ale brewed with sustainable Kernza grains, granola, and heaps of good karma for a refreshing brew that's music to your taste buds. Available nationwide. Visit dogfish.com to find Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale in your neck of the woods. Dogfish Head Craft Brewery is located in Milton, Delaware. Please drink responsibly.
The Conjuring Last Rites. On September 5th.
Hey, come down here! I need your help! Lorraine!
The Conjuring Last Rites. Only in theaters September 5th. Rated R.
This episode is brought to you by Wayfair. Podcasts follow us everywhere. Whether you're cooking in the kitchen, chilling in the living room, or pretending to fold laundry in the bedroom. And with Wayfair, every one of those rooms can tell a story of its own. Their curated collections of furniture styles and prices make Wayfair the trusted destination to turn your home into your happy place. Shop everything home at wayfair.com with free and easy delivery straight to your door.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Have you ever been listening to a creepy ghost story or haunting history and you're like, damn, this is so enjoyable, but I wish my friends were here so we could experience it together? That's us. We're your girls, and we'll bring the snacks when you join us on I Scream, You Scream, the podcast where we serve up chilling stories with a side of our favorite ice cream.
Every month, we pick a new flavor of ice cream and a new topic to go along with it. Werewolves, poison, cemeteries, you name it. From deep dives into stories we all thought we knew to your real-world experiences, at this ice cream party, we always get to the bottom of the bowl.
Cozy up with us every Tuesday for your weekly scoop of the most chilling histories, mysteries, and paranormal perplexities. Until then, keep it cool.
And keep it creepy.
Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Matt Hannah.
We're Horror Hour with the Hannahs, a married couple who love digging into the guts of horror movies.
Literally and figuratively.
Whether it's new releases or cult classics, on our podcast we break down the scares, themes, and hidden messages with just the right amount of love and humor, with some occasional bickering.
So grab your popcorn and your emotional support blanket and join us Wednesdays
for a spooky good time with Horror Hour with the Hannahs.
Available wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe today, if you dare.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell you scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse wherever you stream podcasts. Just be sure to follow and subscribe. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. You can also follow the Red Treehouse on Patreon, where you can receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. Here's something you likely don't know about me. I rarely remember my dreams. In fact, it happens so infrequently that when I do remember one, I ruminate on it for days. And something else, I don't think I've ever had a recurring dream, and certainly not one that helps solve a crime. I realize that was strangely specific, but it's a major part of today's story, which takes us back to 1820s England, where a brutal crime may have been solved by a recurring dream, and more specifically, that the decedent appeared in a dream to a family member and gave them the location of where the crime took place. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the disturbing and eerie case of the Red Barn murder. What happened to Maria Marten in 1827? And did a recurring dream help solve a brutal and tragic crime? I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Maria Marten was born in July 1801 in Suffolk, England, and was the daughter of the village mole catcher. Not much is known about Maria's early life, though we do know by March 1826, when Maria was 24 years old, that she had 2 children out of wedlock, which was a major societal taboo at that time. Something interesting, Maria Marten had 2 children with 2 different fathers, one with a man named Thomas Corder. Tragically, though, the child died as an infant, and she had her second child, Thomas Henry, with a man named Peter Matthew. In both cases, the father refused to marry Maria, and in Peter Matthew's case, he opted to pay child support rather than committing long-term. Back in Maria's day, her situation was considered scandalous because premarital sex was looked down upon, and having children out of wedlock was considered shameful. But there's something that often goes overlooked in these stories: the role of the men. If we look a bit closer, we discover that Thomas Corder wanted to keep his relationship with Maria a secret. He was considered of a higher class than her, and no doubt their relationship would have been frowned upon. And Peter, the father of Maria's second child, simply refused to marry her, likely because marriage was as much about social status as it was about love and commitment. In both cases, the men got what they wanted: a secretive sexual relationship with Maria. And then when she inevitably became pregnant, they abandoned her at first chance. Sometime after the birth of her second child, Maria began a relationship with 22-year-old William Corder, the son of a local farmer, and a man who had a spotty reputation as a fraud and womanizer. If that name sounds familiar, it's because William Corder was the younger brother of Thomas Corder, the father of Maria's first child. William Corder, nicknamed Foxy because of his shady behavior, had once fraudulently sold his father's pigs, wrote bad checks, and stole from neighboring villages. After the fraudulent sale of the pigs, Corder was sent away to London, but was eventually called back when his brother Thomas, quote, drowned while attempting to cross a frozen pond, end quote. While researching, I read an article that stated, quote, William Corder was recalled to Suffolk by his father after he failed to make a success of his life in London, end quote. Within 18 months of William's return, his father and 2 remaining brothers died, leaving William to run the family farm with his mother. Soon after William's return to Suffolk, he caught Maria's attention, and the 2 became lovers, though William, like his brother Thomas, preferred to keep their relationship a secret. The 2 would often have secret meetups in a nearby Red Barn, which was described as a midway point between their homes. As a result, and despite their best efforts to keep the relationship secret, Maria became pregnant and gave birth to their child in 1827, and soon after, she expressed to William a desire to get married. Tragically, though, the child died a few weeks later, and William, quote, buried it secretly, and it has been suggested that the death may not have been of natural causes, end quote. Speculation concerning the child's death began almost immediately after it was discovered there were no burial records on file. At first, this makes some sense, because Maria and William's affair was secret, as was the pregnancy. And considering the fact that Maria had 2 other children out of wedlock, it's not all that shocking that they would bury their child in secret. Except when confronted about this, Maria and William told people they buried the child's body in a specific location. And when people went to where the body was allegedly buried, there were no traces of a grave. There was no headstone, no disturbed dirt. There was nothing. This led to the suggestion that the child may not have died of natural causes, and that William and Maria may have killed their child and disposed of the body in an undisclosed location. Despite the loss of their child, Maria was adamant about marrying William, though he continued to be reluctant to commit. But then one day, William presented Maria with an interesting proposition: that they elope, in large part because he'd heard a rumor that the local constable was planning to arrest Maria for having too many illegitimate children. Maria believed him, except it wasn't true. Convinced that William finally wanted to marry her, they devised a plan, in the presence of Maria's family. Concerned that she wouldn't be able to sneak out unnoticed, William suggested that Maria disguise herself as a boy and meet up with him later at the Red Barn. She would then change into her own clothing and pick up her luggage, which would have been placed there previously, and the couple would then leave for Ipswich, where they would be married within a few days. The two agreed on the plan and took off for what she expected was marital bliss. Except that was the last time Maria Marten was seen alive. One article stated, quote, "The final glimpse of Maria Marten, dressed in breeches with a green handkerchief tied around her neck, was caught by her stepmother Anne, who was looking on from the cottage door as the couple left. They climbed over a gate together and began to make their way across the fields towards the Red Barn. Maria was never seen alive again." End quote. So what happened to Maria Marten? After the pair left for the Red Barn, a few days passed before William reappeared suddenly in Polstead, alone. Upon his return, he reassured Maria's family that they'd made it to Ipswich and that she was safe. When they asked why she didn't accompany him, William said Maria was busy preparing for the wedding. This confused Maria's family, because the plan was for her and William to elope the Sunday after they disappeared, which would have been well before his reappearance in Polstead. When pressed on this, William said that Maria was unable to return with him because their relationship would be looked down upon. Remember, he was of a higher social class than Maria. While Maria's family may have accepted his initial explanation, the questions only deepened when William returned to Polstead more frequently to help his mother at the farm, and always without Maria. And, like the first time, William tried to explain away her absence. This continued for several months into the summer of 1827. And as time passed, Maria's family grew more suspicious. One day, Maria's stepmother Anne confronted William about her whereabouts, and William, who had by now grown accustomed to giving excuses, told her that Maria had hurt her hand, and that was why she was unable to travel aright. He then attempted to offer verbal messages on behalf of Maria to her family. No doubt, William thought he had fooled her, but Anne didn't buy it. Somehow in the conversation, she got him to admit that the two were still not married, and then he was unable to answer how Maria was able to live independently outside of Polstead. In September 1827, William left Polstead for an extended period, and soon after, Maria's family began receiving letters. In October 1827, Maria's father received a letter from William informing him that the pair had finally gotten married. In the letter, he told him they were now living on the Isle of Wight, an island off the southern coast of England, and that they planned to settle down on a farm. Concerned, the family asked why Maria wasn't the one sending the letters. William explained that Maria had allegedly written to the family prior to this and had given them the news of the wedding, and that she was disappointed they'd not replied. Side note, it was later proven that they never received letters because Maria never wrote them. In November 1827, William did something really unusual. He took out an ad in two newspapers, the Morning Herald and the Sunday Times. Quote, "Matrimony. A private gentleman, aged 24, entirely independent, whose disposition is not to be exceeded, has lately lost chief of his family by the hand of Providence, which has occasioned discord among the remainder, under circumstances the most disagreeable to relate. To any female of respectability, who would study for domestic comfort, and is willing to confide her future happiness to one in every way qualified to render the marriage state desirable, as the advertiser is in affluence." End quote. William Corder, who was allegedly newly married to Maria Marten, took out advertisements for a wife. And of course, dozens of hopeful women responded to the ad. And one woman in particular, named Mary Moore, who was a former governess, met with William. And in December 1827, 3 weeks after the advertisement was placed, they were married at St. Andrew's Church. So what happened to Maria Marten? Back in Polstead, Anne Marten was struggling with insomnia. She simply could not sleep through the night. In April 1828, she'd been suffering from a horrifying recurring dream, one that woke her up screaming in the middle of the night. In her dream, she was visited by the apparition of Maria, who claimed she was murdered and buried in the Red Barn. Anne, believing in the veracity of the dream, convinced Maria's father to take a shovel out to the Red Barn. Once there, they dug around the floor of the barn, focusing on a specific corner. After a short time, they discovered the decomposed remains of a young woman buried in a sack, a green handkerchief wrapped around her neck. Closer examination of the barn revealed a bullet hole in one of the walls along with bloodstains. Maria's sister identified her body. She recognized the dress she was wearing, along with several missing teeth in her jaw. It was quickly discovered that not only was Maria shot through the cheek, but she was also stabbed in the side and on the right side of her neck. After months of hearing from William that Maria was safe, her family learned the horrifying truth. Maria was murdered in the Red Barn, and William was suspect number one. Authorities had little trouble locating William Corder, and after first searching in London, he was tracked to his new residence at a school in Brentford. According to one article, he and his new wife Mary Moore were running the Everleigh Grove House, a boarding home for ladies. He was immediately arrested and charged with Maria's murder, and taken back to Suffolk to answer for his crimes. An inquest was held at the Cock Inn in Polstead, and a jury decided he was responsible for the murder of Maria Marten, and he was subsequently taken to jail at Bury St. Edmunds to await trial. For context, the inquest and jury determination is similar to a grand jury certifying charges against the suspect. William Corder's trial began in November 1828, where he was facing at least 9 separate counts, including stabbing Maria in the face, neck, ribs, of shooting her, strangling her, suffocating her during burial, forgery, improper burial, and murder. Maria's 10-year-old brother George claimed to have seen William with a loaded pistol shortly before the murder, and had also seen him leaving the house with a pickaxe. Though it's important to note, these details could not be confirmed beyond George's statement. William pleaded not guilty to the charges, and actually testified in his defense. While on the stand, he admitted to burying Maria and lying to her family about her whereabouts, though he claimed to not have been present during her death. He testified that they argued while walking to the Red Barn, because Maria was upset about the secrecy of their marriage. She felt as though William was ashamed of her. In anger, he called off the marriage on the spot, leaving her alone in the barn and storming off to settle down. He testified that while he was walking, he heard a gunshot behind him, and when he ran back to the Red Barn, he found Maria dead on the ground. According to him, she'd shot herself with his pistols, which he claimed she must have taken from his farm. In a panic, William claimed that he buried Maria in the barn and kept the secret to himself. In an ironic statement, he claimed to have been panicked about being accused of her murder. And after burying her, he kept up the ruse that they'd been married and that Maria was safe and well cared for in Ipswich and then the Isle of Wight. Missing from his testimony, though, were how Maria suffered the other injuries and why he took out an advertisement for a wife while pretending he was married to Maria. After William testified, both sides settled their case, and his fate rested in the hands of the jury, who took 35 minutes to render a verdict. They found William Corder guilty of murdering Maria Marten. He was promptly sentenced to death by hanging, which in those days was carried out within 48 hours of the pronouncement. William was distraught over his fate, and it was alleged that the night before his execution, he admitted to shooting Maria, though he claimed it was an accident. According to one article, quote, "She was changing out of her disguise in the barn, and they were arguing, and the pistol he was waving about went off," end quote. Something interesting. Despite claiming Maria appeared to her, Anne Martin's dream was never entered into evidence against William Corder. On August 11, 1828, William Corder was hanged on the gallows in Bury St. Edmunds in front of a large crowd, with some estimating over 7,000 people were in attendance. Just before the hood was pulled over his head, he gave a final statement, quote, "I am guilty. My sentence is just. I deserve my fate, and may God have mercy on my soul," end quote. After his hanging, William Corder's body was taken to Shire Hall, where it was dissected the following day. Several death masks were made, which are on display today at Moysey's Hall Museum. And in an especially gruesome turn, some of his skin was used to bind a book detailing the murder of Maria Marten. And his skeleton was used as a teaching tool at West Suffolk Hospital, before being put on display in the Hunterian Museum at the Royal College of Surgeons. It hung there until 2004, when it was removed and cremated. After William Corder's execution, some speculated whether Anne's dreams were real, or if she had conspired with William to murder Maria. Depending on which source you read, Anne was either 1 or 10 years older than Maria, and some claim she and William were having an affair. Anne then was alleged to be a co-conspirator to Maria's murder, and then later on, when William met Mary Moore, she became jealous and turned on William. Of course, this is nothing more than speculation that we will never know the truth about. What we do know is horrifying enough, that William Corder murdered Maria Marten in cold blood in the Red Barn. Alright, I'll admit something. Stories like this always frustrate me, because the horrors are multi-layered. The murder of Maria Marten and the subsequent cover-up are infuriating enough. But when you consider the circumstances surrounding the tragedy, well, it's enraging. Because even though this case is almost 200 years old, some things simply don't change. Here's what I mean. In the simplest sense, this is a story about male violence against women. Think of it this way. A woman meets a man. He gets her pregnant. He makes false promises that she believes. Then he either abandons her, like Thomas Corder and Peter Matthew, or he kills her, like William Corder. Maria was a victim, not just of William Corder, but also of the society she grew up in. A society that prioritized men over women. A society where women found value, not because they were human beings deserving of dignity, honor, and respect, but in a husband's last name. A society where women were not allowed to have sexual desires because they were deemed improper, scandalous, or damning. The truth is, Maria was a victim long before she fell prey to William Corder. And while William Corder was rightly punished for his crime, The reality is, his actions and Maria's death should have been an indictment against a system that treated women as subhuman and inevitably discarded them on a whim. I fear the more things change, the more they stay the same. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with this lingering question. What will it take for us as a society to value women and those from other marginalized communities as co-equals? I've shared the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.